Hello, welcome to this test for a podcast. My name is Andres Garcia, and today we'll be looking at some different articles, maybe. The theme is probably going to be philosophy. Let's jump into it. This is from the New Scientist website, and the title of the article is "A Code Hidden in Stone Age Art May Be the Root of Human Writing." A painstaking investigation of Europe's cave art has revealed 32 shapes and lines that crop up again and again and could be the world's oldest code. This article was written by Alison George that works for New Scientist, so I don't take any credit for the article itself. I didn't write it. So here we go. There's a picture of a cave drawing. We can see a horse. It looks like two, maybe bison or buffalo. There's a lot of like red dots and red markings would look like footsteps maybe on a cave wall. When she first saw the necklace, Genevieve von Petzinger feared the trip halfway around the globe to the French village of Les Aizes de Taillac had been in vain. The dozens of ancient deer teeth laid out before her, each one pierced like a bead, looked roughly the same. It was only when she flipped one over that the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. On the reverse were three etched symbols, a line, an X, and another line. So here we basically see the thesis of the article, and it's pretty interesting how it behind this necklace, it seems like our ancestors wrote some sort of semblance of a code. There being the duplicate lines and the X. So this might have meant many things to them. To us, it might be irrelevant, but maybe these lines and these X's were some sort of like primitive language used to represent other objects or other beings. Von Petzinger, a paleoanthropologist from the University of Victoria in Canada, is spearheading an unusual study of cave art. Her interest lies not in the breathtaking paintings of bulls, horses, and bison that usually spring to mind, but in the smaller geometric symbols frequently found alongside them. Her work has convinced her that far from being random doodles, the simple shapes represent a fundamental shift in our ancestors' mental skills. Okay, again, so the article's diving deeper into what these potential markings could mean. And I kind of agree with von Petzinger in the sense that it is more exciting to see some kind of coding or language associated with these animal depictions, which are usually associated with cave drawings, primitive cave drawings. So maybe they use these necklaces to represent maybe an achievement, or maybe to pass down knowledge of some kind that's like useful knowledge that would help others maybe in their hunts, or I don't know, something. It's gotta mean something. The first formal writing system that we know of is the 5,000-year-old cuneiform script of the ancient city of Uruk in what is now Iraq. But it and other systems like it, such as Egyptian hieroglyphics, are complex and didn't emerge from a vacuum. There must have been an earlier time when people first started playing with simple abstract signs. For years, von Petzinger has wondered if the circles, triangles, and squiggles that humans began leaving on cave walls 40,000 years ago represent that special time in our history, the creation of the first human code. So, I guess if we have a code, there might have been, I don't know if the article is going to talk about this, I haven't read the whole thing yet, but it might have a codex or what is, I'm not sure what the name is, I can't remember right now, but there's like, if you have a code, you have a way to decipher it. I think it's called the cipher, if I remember correctly. And so if you have the symbols that can like hide your language, so this potentially actually shows a great deal of sophistication. If this is indeed a code that they have discovered in these markings, then this is showing that not only did they have a written language, but they also had a code that would be used to encode the language so that only certain individuals that knew the code could decipher the etchings or the lines. All right, let's continue with the article. If so, the marks are not to be sniffed at. Our ability to represent a concept with an abstract sign is something no other animal, not even our closest cousins, the chimpanzees, can do. It is arguably also the foundation for our advanced global culture. The first step to check for her theory was no fastidiously document the signs, their location, age and style, and see if any patterns emerged. For this, von Petzinger would have to visit as many caves as she could. Archaeology's focus on paintings of animals meant the signs were often overlooked in existing records. Here we have some etchings. There's a picture in the article, another picture. I see like squares, a lot of squares, a lot of cross hatching. It looks like a cliff. Maybe this could be like instructions, like a map, like a primitive map. But it's not very clear. It's just very basic shapes like squares and triangles. There's not too much detail. I would imagine they would have used very primitive stone tools, or maybe it would have had to have been stone to mark this, because other things wouldn't have been as hard enough to make these markings. It wasn't easy or glamorous work. Gaining access to caves in France, where a lot of Stone Age art is located, can be devilishly complicated. Many are privately owned and sometimes jealously guarded by archaeologists. For the full set of symbols, von Petzinger also had to visit many obscure caves, the ones without big, flashy paintings. At El Portillo in northern Spain, all she had to go on was a note an archaeologist made in 1979 of some red signs. No one had been back since. At first, von Petzinger couldn't even find the entrance. Eventually, she noticed a tiny opening at knee level, trickling with water. "Thank God I'm not claustrophobic," she says. After 2 hours sliding through mud inside the mountain, she found 2 dots painted in pinkish ochre. So, I would imagine that the people that were doing this might have been doing it in secret, because a lot of these works are not very detailed. They're not embellished at all. It's just like super simple and to the point. And that might be the case, or also they might have not had too many materials to do this kind of work. Maybe it was scarce, like maybe they had to use, I don't know, berries or their own blood, or again the stone tools, maybe like some kind of stone hammer and a stone chisel, something like that. I can't imagine how the process uh, for creating these pieces. All right, let's go back to the article. Between 2013 and 2014, von Pettinger visited 52 caves in France, Spain, Italy, and Portugal. The symbols she found range from dots, lines, triangles, squares, and zigzags to more complex forms, like ladder shapes, hand stencils, something called a tectiform that looks a bit like a post with a roof, and feather shapes called penniforms. In some places, the signs were part of bigger paintings. Elsewhere, they were on their own, like the row of bell shapes found in El Castillo in northern Spain, or the panel of 15 penniforms in Santian, also in Spain. Oh, okay, so it seems like they used even like pressings of leaves and feathers to kind of get their point across. It's interesting how would they know what a bell is if there was no such thing as a bell? But these are clearly bells, unless they were symbols meant to represent something else. But these shapes are clearly bells that I see in this picture. Wow. All right, let's move on. Our ability to represent a concept with an abstract symbol is uniquely human. Perhaps the most startling finding was how few signs there were, just 32 in all of Europe. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors seem to have been curiously consistent with the symbols they used. This, if nothing else, suggests that the markings had some sort of significance. Of course they mean something, says French prehistorian Jean Klotz. They didn't do it for fun. The multiple repetitions of the P-shaped claviform sign in France's Niao cave can't be a coincidence, he argues. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Like, somebody had to take time out of their survival, because back then there were no amenities. It was, you just had to do the very basics to survive. You know, there wasn't luxury back then. So these people were trying to get something across. Like, this was crucial information. I still can't really comprehend why they did this. Thanks to von Petzinger's meticulous logging, it's now possible to see trends, new signs appearing in one region, sticking around for a while before falling out of fashion. Hand stencils, for example, were fairly common in the earliest parts of the Upper Paleolithic era, starting 40,000 years ago, then fall out of fashion 20,000 years later. You see a cultural change take place, says von Petzinger. The earliest known penniform is from about 28,000 years ago in the Grand Grotte de Arcy-sur-Cure in northern France, and later appears a little to the west of there before spreading south. Eventually, it reaches northern Spain and even Portugal. Von Petzinger believes it was first disseminated as people migrated, but its later spread suggests it then followed trade routes. Okay, so this is going back to my previous idea that they are using these symbols to communicate to somebody. They're leaving them in specific areas to maybe show people where the herds of animals were going, because at this point in history, humans were hunters and gatherers. They didn't have there's no evidence of farming technology at this point when these symbols were originated. So they were doing this because of scarcity, I would imagine, of their, of what they depended on to survive, so that they could have a better chance of survival. I would imagine that's what the main purpose of these paintings were, this code. All right, let's go back to the article. The research also reveals that modern humans were using 2/3 of these signs when they first settled in Europe, which creates another intriguing possibility. This does not look like the start-up phase of a brand new invention, von Petzinger writes in her recently published book, The First Signs, Unlocking the Mysteries of the World's Oldest Symbols, Simon & Schuster. In other words, When modern humans first started moving into Europe from Africa, they must have brought a mental dictionary of symbols with them. That fits well with the discovery of a 70,000-year-old block of ochre etch with cross-hatching in Blombos Cave in South Africa. And when von Petzinger looked through the archaeology papers for mentions of illustrations of symbols in cave art outside Europe, she found that many of her 32 signs were used around the world. There is even tantalizing evidence that an earlier human, Homo erectus, deliberately etched a zigzag on a shell on Java some 500,000 years ago. The ability of humans to produce a system of signs is clearly not something that starts 40,000 years ago. This capacity goes back at least 100,000 years, says Francesco de Erigo from the University of Bordeaux, France. Okay, so I guess what this article is pretty much challenging what we've previously known, and that is that the first system of writing came from Uruk in modern, what is now modern day Iraq, and there seems to be a lot of consistency in these symbols, and it does suggest that there's some bigger picture here. There's a bigger idea that they were using these symbols not only as, decorations for these caves, that they were of some sort of practical use. All right, let's get back to the article. Nonetheless, something quite special seems to have happened in Ice Age Europe. In various caves, von Petzinger frequently found certain symbols used together. For instance, starting 40,000 years ago, hand stencils are often found alongside dots. Later, between 28,000 to 22,000 years ago, they are joined by thumb stencils and finger flutting, parallel lines created by dragging fingers through soft cave deposits. I'm not sure what the hand stencils would represent. Maybe this would suggest a number system, or it could just be someone drawing their hand. I have no idea. But this article is really interesting. Okay, now the next section is called Etched Teeth. Wow. Okay, there's a picture of teeth, and one of them has 3 lines. One of them has 5 lines, and 3 of the lines are made into like a little star. They're all crossing each other, and then there's 2 that are parallel above that. And each of these teeth has like different symbols. One has an X on it. One has 5 lines. One has like what looks like a T, like 2 perpendicular lines. So they were definitely trying to display different symbols on different teeth, and there's holes through the teeth, so I would imagine they would have been on some sort of string, some sort of fiber of a plant, maybe like in a necklace. This is really interesting. And then so they would carry it around with them, so they had the representation of some sort of knowledge that they didn't want to forget. Wow, that's crazy. All right. So the article says these kinds of combinations, are particularly interesting if you're looking for the deep origins of writing systems. Nowadays, we effortlessly combine letters to make words and words to make sentences, but this is a sophisticated skill. Von Petzinger wonders whether the people of Upper Paleolithic started experimenting with more complex ways of encoding information using deliberate, repeated sequences of symbols. Unfortunately, that's hard to say from signs painted on cave walls, where arrangements could be deliberate or completely random. Demonstrating that a sign was conceived as a combination of 2 or more different signs is difficult, says Derrico. So I guess what the experts are saying is that maybe there's not enough evidence, because it's saying it's difficult. So what I interpret that to mean is that maybe there's not enough evidence, because based on most modern languages, we have like complex alphabets which have like more than like 20 letters, 20 characters, you know. Most Latin based languages have at least like 20 something, you know. I'm not sure about other, maybe like Asian languages are different or they have even more. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that respect, but um, yeah, to me, I could assume that this was some sort of language or some sort of, you know, um, recording of some kind of. They were trying to um, like etch a memory into, you know, objects that they carried around with them for some kind of purpose. But other than that, I can't really say much about it. All right, let's go back to the article. It was while she was grappling with this conundrum that von Pettinger found out about the necklace of red deer teeth. It was found among other artifacts in the grave of a young woman who died some 16,000 years ago in Saint Germain de la Riviere in southwest France. From a description in a book, von Pettinger knew that many of the teeth had geometric designs carved into them. So she traveled from Canada to the National Museum of Prehistory in Les Assises de Tagiac, where the teeth were held, in the hope that they might be a missing piece of her puzzle. And then we see a map. Okay, so there's a lot of common symbols on this map. In Africa, in northern Africa, there's 4 repeating symbols. In France, there's like 20 at least. So that could indicate some sort of alphabet or symbology, you know, at least a symbology. Because if we're not going to call this a language, I think at least we should be considering that it's a symbology, because these are clearly symbols, and we know from other cave drawings and paintings that these ancient people were trying to express themselves, or they achieved self-expression through these paintings in caves and on teeth and other such, you know, materials. And it's really interesting. I guess we can take interest into language itself and how amazing that is, that we use symbols and sounds. But I mean, these are we're not going to be able to know the sounds they use, obviously, but visually how we communicate still to this day, it seems to be a staple of, you know, our you know, psychology. So that in itself is pretty interesting to me. All right, let's go back to the article. The moment she flipped the first one, she knew the trip had been worthwhile. The X and straight lines were symbols she had seen together and separately on various cave walls. Now here they were, with the X sandwiched between 2 lines to form a compound character. As she turned each tooth over, more and more decorations were revealed. In the end, 48 were etched with single signs or combinations, many of which were also found in caves. Whether or not the symbols are actually writing depends on what you mean by writing, says D'Errico. Strictly speaking, a full system must encode all of human speech, ruling the Stone Age signs out. But if you take it to mean a system to encode and transmit information, then it's possible to see the symbols as early steps in the development of writing. That said, cracking the prehistoric code may prove impossible. Something we call a square to an Australian Aborigine might represent a well, says Klotz. Yeah, so I guess it all depends on what we consider language to be, like what the definition of a language is. And if we choose the definition to mean that these symbols are some sort of code that transmit information, then yeah, it's a writing system and it's some sort of language. But if we see that this language is maybe lacking, that we don't have enough evidence to show every single, potential form of lingual expression, then yeah, definitely it's not a language in that respect. So it's going to be interesting to see what people take from this, and I think it's interesting even today what people consider language and self-expression and how they express themselves. But that's a completely different topic to talk about entirely. All right, let's go back to the article. For D'Errico, we will never understand the meaning of the symbols without also considering the animal depictions they are so often associated with. It is clear that the two make sense together, he says. Similarly, cuneiform is composed of pictograms and counting tallies. A ration, for instance, is represented by a bowl and human head, followed by lines to denote quantity. Von Pettinger points out another reason to believe the symbols are special. The ability to realistically draw a horse or mammoth is totally impressive, she says. But anybody can draw a square, right? To draw these signs, you are not relying on people who are artistically gifted. In a sense, the humble nature of such shapes makes them more universally acceptable, an important feature for an effective communication system. There is a broader possibility for what they could be used for and who was using them. Right. So, definitely, I think I might have said this before, but there has to be some sort of relationship between the animal paintings that are more popular, more, in the public eye at this point, and as opposed to the markings that this article is talking about. But definitely, even today, a lot of our communication is a mix of media. Not only, like our expression comes in different forms. It's not just, written language. It's also, pictures and videos, and we've evolved a long way from cave drawings to Instagram, I would say. All right, let's go to the article again. More than anything, she believes the invention of the first code represents a complete shift in how our ancestors shared information. For the first time, they no longer had to be in the same place at the same time to communicate with each other, and information could survive its owners. The quest is far from over. Von Pettinger plans to expand her Stone Age dictionary by adding in the wealth of signs on portable objects, in caves, on other continents, and maybe even those found beneath the waves. We only have part of the picture now. We are on the cusp of an exciting time. And that's the end of the article. Beautiful. Okay. Again, this article was brought to you by the New Scientist website, newscientist.com. I barely found this article today, but it was written a while ago by Allison George. The title of the article is Code Hidden in Stone Age Art May Be the Root of Human Writing. And yeah, you know what? I'm not going to sit here and say that that I completely agree with either, Von Pettinger or D'Errico. But I will say that it is very interesting to see this new development. And I'm not going to say that... I don't think that this is exactly what a language is by definition, but I do think it is a fragment of language. It was, a step in our evolutionary ladder or staircase, if you will, and it just makes me appreciate where we are in our current state of, communication, and how we use words, how we speak to each other, and how we record things, how we have computers now and phones and tablets, and we can take pictures and take video, and we can send that to others, and we can save it on, hard drives, and on, we can have like all this information, like terabytes of information. And back then it was only on select walls, and like the person who had that deer tooth necklace was probably, like coveted, and like was like a really special individual, and like they were probably like called like the keeper of the knowledge or something like that. You know what I mean? Like things were more scarce back then. But now we have so much information that it's just a different culture today, with respect to language and its relationship to information. Specifically writing, I think most of us are texting nowadays. It seems like, I don't know. I know that some people are still writing letters to each other, and that's kind of becoming a lost art. But I don't know. It's interesting because I don't know how long these people were holding their ideas before they were able to express them on, on the cave that was their canvas, or the teeth that was like their piece of paper, or their phone. For them, that's what it was. Um, I would imagine. And yeah, that's it for now, guys. Thanks for listening. I'll probably find some other articles and keep doing this on the regular. I felt inspired today to do this little project, and hopefully it blossoms into something beautiful. All right, take it easy.